¿Aló? Sí. Hola. Buenos días a
Hello.
todas
Hello,
y
good morning, everyone.
les queremos
Would
indicar que
like
estamos
to let you know that we have a small delay in the agenda
dado la apertura
because
con el
due
presidente
to
Biden del
the
país
morning's
respecto
opening with
al
the
festival.
president, we had a delay
Estamos
in the next
esperando que
activities.
finalice la
So
actividad del
we're waiting
Ministerio
for an
entonces
activity with the
solamente
Minister
para
of Energy, with the Council of
informar
Ministers
brevemente
to end, but
esperamos
it's
unos
just a
minutos.
small delay.
Agradecemos
We're
toda
waiting
su
for a few
paciencia
minutes
y
for
esperando
that to be over,
termine
for the
todo
activity to be
bien.
over.
Muchas
So
gracias
please
y
wait for
gracias
a few
nuevamente
more
por su
minutes,
paciencia.
and thank you once again for being here.
Recording in progress.
Bien, muy buenos días nuevamente a todas y a todos. Como les indicábamos, ya
Good
estamos.
morning, everyone. As we're saying, we're now ready to start with this keynote session, looking at the consumption strategies for the decarbonization of demand, which is something really important in the context of the 10th week of energy in OLADE. Would like to first thank you for your attendance and thank to our authorities that are present here, our Minister of Energy, Mr. Diego Pardo. Welcome. Welcome, Minister. Thank you for joining us this morning. Also, Superintendent for Electricity and Fuel, Marta Cabresa. Thank you. And also our panelists, Analia Rojas, the Executive Director for the National Association for Renewable Energy, and Ezequiel Tavernelli, the Executive Director for Latin American Association for Steel. Ezequiel, welcome. Guillermo Arias, responsible for governmental relations, external affairs for BMW Group. Jacqueline Asbun Arias, the Executive Director for the Colombian Association of Engineers. And also would like to greet Jacqueline. Joana Monteiro, she's also going to talk about something very interesting. She is the head of the electric markets in the minister, so welcome. And also Lumila de Oliveira Diniz, the head of the division for Latin America and the Caribbean for the organization of the UN for Industrial Development, UNUDI. So welcome. And would also like to greet everyone joining us, companies and different organizations. Thank you. Welcome. And just to start, I'd like to first start with the keynote speaker, our minister, Mr. Diego Prado. He's going to share a few words. The floor is yours.
Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo están?
Hello, how are you?
¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo están?
How are you? Good morning.
Gracias por venir hoy.
Thank you for coming today. I'm going to talk very briefly, and this is the presentation. The presentation will be done by Joanna. She's going to share a few more words on it, but I wanted to tell you about the motivation behind this plan. What reflects, and well, since we have people coming from different parts of Latin America, I wanted to explain why we do things the way we do them here, and why there's always a plan for something. And in a way, we are guiding ourselves towards these instruments. And someone coming from abroad, from where the electric sector or energy sector has more government presence, as regulation entities. Well, you may ask, why don't you just do it if there's a political decision behind that and you all agree on it, right? If you all agree on it, why don't you have like a warrant that can be transmitted vertically to other spaces that will execute it? Well, after all, it's an executive power, right? And our electric grid, it's a discussion that we had 40 years ago. And in general terms, we are really happy with the process. We're satisfied with this process of generating a bit of a competition and having a market for electric generation, energy generation, that, well, as we were able to see yesterday, we can incorporate technology really in a fast manner, and not only flowing along with one technology and understanding that things are changing, but also going along with the market and also being able to move capital around. I was talking about yesterday that maybe in January we'll declare under construction about 8,000 gigawatts of storage. So it's about $8,000 million. And the public sector, we cannot raise that amount of money in just 12 months. There's no way that such a change can be possible without the instruments in the market. And now, when it comes to transmission, we started with a privatization process. Now we have about 8. And under transmission, we had 1 and 3 through different groups. that allow to have some natural monopolies, but also to have a competition by benchmark and working with regulators. And this is something where this can be compared one to another. So, of course, there's a challenge here because it's a very, very complex system, much more complex than if this was just belonging to one entity making the decision and organizing. And so when we make decisions as a sector, we need to call for different stakeholders. And that needs coordination effort, and that coordination effort, that is what this plan is about, the decarbonization plan. And we learned from the commitment from 2018, mainly with coal companies. And I think the focus changes from then on. It goes in three directions. The first one, the initial plan for phase out of coal had a very big focus on the assets that are issued, but it was all about output, but it was not so much about input. And we need to make sure that when you switch the light on, there's this magical moment where the light bulb goes on. So that is, of course, it's not necessarily a criticism to the previous process. Of course, we started with the least resistant process, removing all units that were not operating, those that were more simple, older. And as we were moving along during the process, well, we realized that actually it's not only about the output asset and what we are removing out of circulation, but everything, all the input, all of the renewable energy that needs to replace that, all the transition and a series of technological changes are necessary so that things continue working. So this decarbonization plan, while it's about a phase out of all the coal units that are still working in our country, there's a big focus on those things that need to come in, those that will enable the right conditions. So I would say that in a way that's the first learning. And second, it's about how in our country these energy policies usually are based in market conditions. So we need to change several regulations on how the market response works and how we trigger, how we accelerate this response so that these conditions, which finally are a private investment, can be feasible and they happen at places where that happens, and that has to do with the restriction in our system. So we know that there's no entity that makes decisions and says, okay, this is the path we're taking. It's always about participation. It's always on the different stakeholders that are part of it. And so a focus on the enabling conditions, a focus on how regulation needs to enable new market conditions so that we can also do this in a faster way. We want to actually move it faster than our goal. And so I think we need to assess this. And in the middle of that path, we started to go a bit faster in the phase out, and we realized that this phase was a bit easier. So the hardest part will be done in a more efficient way. That is actually what we're doing. So to stay up to these standards, we need a clear route. We need to make sure that we are properly organized, and this is what the decarbonization plan is all about. And we also start with a debate that we saw in our society, which is in all transition, at some point, you have to think about what is your backup hydrocarbon. And that is a tough question because maybe the easiest way would be to plan and being optimistic and, understanding that we'll have favorable energy. So But when you start planning in a responsible manner, you always have to consider, okay, what if I have something that is unfavorable? What if the technologies that provide wind power, for example, solar power, what if they don't come in time? So that's when we start debating. And I think that truly helped with the decarbonization plan. And we found out that while we may not want this, we need to be able to look at the worst case scenario and consider what are we going to do in a participation way and in a participant way, and how can we help society, and how can we make the best decisions. This is the idea behind the decarbonization plan. So if you read that in the press, you see that it seems like it's taking too long. And yes, it's taking a long time because it was extremely hard. When we look at this plan, let's please value what this actually means in such a complex system like the Chilean system. And it's important to visualize how difficult some discussions are, and we should all agree on what is the evidence we're looking at, and being able to make a decision that is consistent and goes along with that evidence. Now, what's the good news is what I was saying at the beginning. What's good is that when we make a decision, those decisions usually stick over time. And we see a lot of people here that participated. Javier Carlos, many of you participated in different decisions along all of this with the unions, academy, with civil society. So each of the hours that were invested in agreeing on something, what's really good is that once we make a decision, these are anchored and they help us to move along towards the future. So truly, those are here in this room. Obviously, those are the responsible ones in the ministry, but in the academia, civil society, different organizations, environmental organizations, in the industry, unions. Thank you for taking the time and for working along with us. And we really hope that this will guide us towards the right pathway towards decarbonization. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Lo invitamos a permanecer, ministro. Muchas gracias por esas palabras.
Please, Minister, if you can stay around, because we want to really thank you for that approach on the decarbonization plan, and we'll be able to understand a bit more in detail thanks to Joanna. And we'd like for you to take a picture with the plan, and we'd like to also invite our panelists, Marta Cabezas, our superintendent, so that we can have the official picture. Gaston Silva, he is the regional director for the Methane Observatory for Latin America and the Caribbean. He's going to be moderating the next panel. We'd like to invite Analia, Ezequiel, Guillermo, Jacqueline, Giovanna as well, and Ludmila, so that we can take the official picture with the plan.
Ahí los fotógrafos nos avisan cuando ya estemos.
Okay, you can let us know when you're ready. We can continue with the session.
Un aplauso, por supuesto. Muchas gracias, ministro.
Thank you, Minister.
Sabemos que tiene una agenda complicada.
We know you have a packed schedule, and as our secretary was executive secretary of Finland was explaining, well, you'll know this is a seismic country, so please don't be scared. We're the epicenter of energy, so we continue working. Many things are happening here in the neighboring room, so thank you, Minister, for joining us, and have a great day. Okay, so now we'll continue with our panel. I was already telling you who's joining us. First, we'd like to invite Gaston Silva. He is the regional director of the Observatory of Methane for OLADE, and he is going to be the moderator of the panel. And we'd also like to invite Analia Rojas, the executive director for the Chilean Association for Renewable Energy and Storage, the executive director for the Latin American Society of Steel, Guillermo Arias, responsible for governmental relations and external affairs in BMW Group, Jacqueline Arias, executive director for the Colombian Association of Engineers, Joana Monteiro, she's the head of the Electric Market Division and the Ministry of Energy in Chile, and also Ludmila de Oliveira, the head of the Division of Latin American and the Caribbean for the UNUDI. Thank you. Floor is yours. You can also help us with the microphones. Thank you. Okay, Gaston, the floor is yours.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Thank you,
Bienvenidos a todos.
and welcome everyone.
Por la demora
I'm sorry for the delay. We had several meetings,
pero bueno, creo que valió la pena
but I think it was worth the wait.
grato ver
It's always a pleasure
completa.
seeing such a full audience and
Continuar con las palabras
such great attendance, and to continue with Diego's welcome words. I think we could briefly introduce the plan,
a Joana.
and Joanna is joining us, and she's going to share a glimpse of the plan, and you have the clicker there. And I don't know if you'd like to start, and then we'll continue with the. Is that okay? Yes.
Sí, vamos a esperar que pongan la presentación.
Okay, we'll wait for the previous presentation.
Si no, mientras
If
la
not, while they're loading the presentation. Oh, there it is. Okay, great.
Bueno, primero que todo,
Well, first, I'd like to thank you for the invitation. And as the minister mentioned, this decarbonization plan that was presented today, and you can find that available in the website for the Ministry of Energy. It's something that's been taking quite a while. And the goal of the plan has to do with establishing a roadmap for decarbonization in terms of determining and helping materialize what are the enabling conditions so that this happens, and also to provide continuity in this agreement, the public-private agreement that started in 2019, so that we can contribute to our neutral carbon goals in the climate framework that we have. So this was a plan that had lots of participation. We had over 10 sessions where we saw participation, and also we shared relevant information from the academia and from unions and civil society. And the idea was to agree on something and to speak the same language in terms of what do we need for this second stage or second time of energy transition. And we had the Inter-American Bank of Development support, and we also had lots of information, studies that to what we're looking at. And I'd also like to thank the Engineering Studies Institute, because thanks to the work that they carried out in 2024 in the wholesale market and the draft of the public consultation that we created last year, they were able to provide information on whether the initiatives that we were presenting and proposing go in the right direction towards energy transition. And this table happened in 2023, 2024, and we had some conversation pillars, and these were technical meetings, and we shared evidence, and we tried to agree on what was the right path to reach the goal that we all know, right, which is a neutral zero emissions by 2030. So, but the goal was not that clear, and so the idea was to actually provide certainty and what are we going to do and how to continue. The energy policy is a state policy, and this transcends government, so an administration. So, it started in 2015, and that was updated in 2022. And by 2023, we provided the agenda that had to do with energy transition, which short-term goals, which was related to the times back then. And then the planning decree for energy in the long term came out, and we're really happy to have this guideline and to look at the projection of the sector, energy sector in the future. And now we are launching the decarbonization plan with the roadmap and this plan that the minister was mentioning, which is really important to agree on how we're going to reach energy transition. And this is a landscape, and we're really happy to see that and see where we are in terms of the removal of coal centrals. 11 have been removed so far, and the minister was saying it in the beginning. The first units that were removed were units that were older, less efficient, and that did not provide a lot of big service. So the second groups of unit that we want to remove, it's not as easy. These are units that the system, due to different technical reasons, they are more needed. Therefore, we need to replace those assets, and we need to replace that energy supply so that we can actually remove them. And here in this slide, we see the path and where the decarbonization plan is. We start with a public-private agreement in 2018, where there was a commitment of companies to start coal transition. And we started working with some policies and also this storage bill, and that goes along with energy transition, but also, of course, we have to consider the world order, because no country can escape what's happening across the globe. The pandemic and the war in Ukraine, these were events that really took over the agenda for a few years. We have an increase in fuel prices and oil prices. So, of course, as the ministries, energy sectors, we were really working on short-term measurements, and that's where the second time agenda came out, which has concrete measurements, short-term measurements, and we've met all of those goals. And the idea was to attack the situations or contain some situations. And what the president mentioned this morning, we have short-term measurements in terms of transmission so that we can face limitations and delays in development of the infrastructure and the transmission. So in this context, we started with the decarbonization plan, and we wanted to look into the future, and starting with a clear working plan in the industry. And we wanted to see where regulatory frameworks are going to be most important towards energy transition. And the idea is to meet our goals by 2050 in terms of the climate change framework. And this is what the minister was discussing yesterday. We had some coal centrals, and we removed the first units. We not have a lot of issues with the electric grid, but then there was the second stage where safety reports, that are shown by the coordinator, and that shows that there's some attributes that are desirable, and we'll stop having them before we remove the next coal unit. So this is where we need to change some relations, and we need to provide everything that is right so that we can drive investment and we can have other types of technologies, so that then we go to a third stage where the idea is to consolidate and to monitor the progress under the enabling conditions, so that we can remove the coal centrals, and so that we can do this as fast as possible to accelerate the goals of 2040 as soon as possible. And now I just have a few more slides. We're not going to, yes, this is not a workshop or complete development of the initiatives, but it's 20 concrete measures and with the 4 axes. And what I would like to mention is the first one, because decarbonization plans and roadmaps, we see some in the sector, and that's really thankful. And development we want to have a social standpoint, and we have a second axis that has to do with strategic planning for development of the electric grid, a third axis on transmission, and a fourth axis that takes over having a flexible and safe electric grid in terms of operations and renewable energy. And this is just a preview and a summary of some of the things that each of the measures are all about. First, the first axis is to accelerate a few projects and there's paperwork. Some have to do with helping the reconversion of coal centrals, and also measurements that have to do with dialogue and governance and local development. And it needs to we need to consider communities and territories in this project investment in transmission, also generation. And second axis, we have the strengthening of the planning instrument for the long term, and how this is related to the planning of transmission, and how we actually define the concept of strategic works within this framework. Then the transmission axis that has to do with remuneration and the tariffs, so that we can provide localization signals and also have an efficient management of the infrastructure. And finally, a fourth axis has to do with improving the complementary services market and also wholesale market, and how we're going to move towards a market that is all about offers, and also the current operation system and the visibility and importance of the PMGs in the system. And with that preview, that's it for me. You're invited to download the decarbonization plan, which is on the website. And I'd like to also invite you to a webinar where we're going to discuss in more detail each of the measurements, and we're going to explain them in detail. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias,
Thank you.
Joana.
Thank you, Joanna.
Algo que
Now,
tendría que haber hecho un
something that we should have done earlier, but it's the third day, we're a bit more tired, but I wanted to share with you the idea behind this panel, and trying to do that without any spoilers. That's a bit more difficult, but this is the Energy Week in Chile, and please let's remember we have 27 countries joining us. So part of what we wanted to represent in the panel is that here you have right in front of you people from Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Guatemala, Nicaragua. And so that needs a lot of work, but why do we do that? Because the view that we want to provide in this keynote panel, in terms of decarbonization, we want to provide a global view. And we also have diversity. We have people that work in the government, people that work in multilateral organizations, business chambers,
Recording in progress.
concibiendo este proceso que van a hacer en el sector eléctrico. Después, ahora no les voy a decir nada de lo que nos va a contar Analía, pero presten mucha atención porque es la que nos va a abrir la puerta de lo que vendrá después.
Let us know what's happening next. And when it comes to decarbonization, it's not only about the electric sector, but it's also about other uses. So we're going to talk about transportation. I'm not going to tell you who's going to talk about that, but I'm sure you can guess that. We're going to talk about the industrial side. So when we talk about decarbonization, you'll be able to understand where the emissions are. Those are not in the electric sector, and that will give us a whole view and regional view. So without any further ado, Analia, the floor is yours.
Me voy a acomodar por acá porque me
Well, I'm
gusta hacer
going to sit around here or stay here. I like to stand up while sharing some thoughts. It's a bit more comfortable for me. Well, thank you for being here. And it's a real pleasure for us. Thank you for the space. Thank you to Alive. And well, this is a reflection on what Weston said. Here we have a detailed plan for decarbonization and the electric system. And what's been happening lately, where we're talking about that with with the people that are in the panel, we were discussing that, and we have electrified the conversation because the electric grid is not the most important part that needs to be decarbonized. So that seems to be a news or a secondary news after all the processes of carbon removal in Chile. So I'm going to invite you to look at this presentation, which is Union. And we are really interested in the electric sector. I'm going to tell you why. Well, that's the union presentation. It's 154 companies. It's not alliances. And of course, we have companies, alliances, the MOUs, and we try to make that as practical and as effective as possible. But there's a company, and our mission is to make sure the value chain of renewable energies and storage. The last A is in Acera is for storage. So we want to make sure all of this grows. Why do we want to have a renewable industry that goes beyond the goal of having a climate action? Today, we are really concerned about about economics and safety and geopolitics and energy. So I'm going to invite you to look at some indicators from 2025 from Latin America and the Caribbean to elevate to the view, and not only discussing as hosts, because I think Chile's experience is really relevant so that we can scale up in the region and to look at what we have been doing in matters of decarbonization in the electric sector and also in other non-electric sectors, those that are using energy. So the first reflection is that there's two careers, and we need to increase the participation and the weight of renewable energy. And so we generate electricity. Okay. And we see how electrification has different measures. And we need to look at the economy, whether it's a network, whether it's self-supply, and whether it's different projects, consumption, but it's the amount of kilowatt per hour that we consume.
Pero básicamente yo seleccioné un par de países, estos de World in Data. Les recomiendo ese sitio porque realmente tiene mucha información y bien actualizada.
There's a lot of information and outdated here. It's an effort from companies to maintain these databases well reported. So we have the renewable penetrations in Latin America. Here's a selection of countries that were interesting. I consider this interesting for the audience, and these are some. All of them. What we do see, nevertheless, is that we have a broader range of renewable penetration in the electrical grid currently, from a minimum from 22%, I think it's Mexico, until 95% in the case of Uruguay. Therefore, this is one of the things that characterizes us as Latin America, related also to the amount of resources, whether they're natural resources that we have in each of the countries of Latin America, if they're richer or not so rich. Obviously, we've considered renewables here, not hydroelectricity and non-conventional renewables, like solar, wind, and all those renewable energies that were not traditional beforehand in our country. So in Chile, we see 70%, which is basically the addition of when there's water in Chile. The system elevates its renewable penetration, of course, which is much different when it's dry. We have a drier hydrological periods of time. In Argentina, 32%, and other countries as well. Nevertheless, you can see that there's a broad range and minimum amounts as well. This is within the electrical grid. The question which obviously one has to ask is, how much does it weigh in each of these countries, this electrical grid? So this is the news. There is a smaller range of weight of electrical grids within the power sector, energy or power sector. It's between 14 and 26%. Chile has 22%, around there, 21.89%. Brazil, the most electrified country, Latin America. Morocco, he's got nothing to do there, but I must have clicked that by accident. Don't forget about that one. Venezuela's the lowest. And of course, this is one of the main concerns that we have. We have a low percentage of electrical market within the total consumption, electrical consumption. This is repeated in all Latin American countries. I checked Peru, Bolivia, all more or less around 22 to 25%, that range. So we reflect, therefore, that the world and Latin America, I'm going to try to say this as nice as possible because it's complicated, but I made it up as well. It probably doesn't exist. It's renovating itself. So basically, the grids or matrices are becoming more renewable. Nevertheless, we're not electrifying ourselves. And this has many things to consider. I took this from a paper from, I recommend you, Kisman and Bond, from the Rocky Mountains Institute. It says here that the most important careers call electrification right here now. Competition, the race, let's say, the race, because it's to replace 60% of fossil fuels that are used in countries. That's the whole purpose. And also the way of substituting 75% on average of important countries of fossil fuels, on how to substitute these imports. And the other thing is that electrification is deriving in the geopolitical leadership of countries. Those countries that are more electrified, in other words, start to appear in certain leadership positions in other matters, not only energy. China, for example, is taking the lead role there. 10 every decade that each is becoming more electrified. 10 points, so the electrical demand has grown much more than the rest of other sectors or energy sectors, and more than the GDP. In the case of Chile, up to a decade ago, when the GDP grew at 5 to 6%, the electrical demand grew 7 to 9%. Currently, we're the other way around. We have less economic growth, 2.5, 6, 2.8, depending how you measure it, and electrical demand grows less than the economic cycle, 1.6, 1.8. This year, it's grown nearly 0.0 something. Nothing really. That's why we're regarding an association where we need an association observing the demand. Now it is, but it wasn't always like this. Second, the public debate here. I wrote down here that ignores. Ignoring is a bit strong, but it's not the focus of the political discussion at the moment, what we call electrification. The policy of electrification is not actually there even. They're focused on other things. Renewable penetration, for example, blackouts, rates. But a policy on electrification itself, I've never heard. The last thing, there's a very tempting paragraph there. Chileans can understand this. It's words of a former president. But what we wish is to provoke within this conversation and this discussion to understand that this is not just a detail which is going to be seen in the long run. No, it has to be done now. We have to. I'm going to explain why. This is the typical chart. Once again, in Chile here, penetration, solar penetration in yellow, wind in green, and at the top, the demand
Entonces,
itself.
¿cuál es mi reflexión?
So
Hemos
my
ido
reflection
aumentando
is that we have
penetración
increased the
solar y
penetration
eólica,
of solar
eólica
and
menos,
wind
solar
less though.
claramente muy
Solar, very much so,
significativamente en las últimas 5 años o 6
during
años.
the last 5,
Sin
6
embargo, la
years.
demanda eléctrica se ve
However,
como
electrical demand is regarded as something
y luego entonces,
not so
¿dónde está el
much.
debate?
So where's the
La
debate?
diferencia que les decía antes. El debate está no solamente en Chile, por cierto,
Not
sino
just
que
in
también
Chile,
está
nevertheless, it has also
penetrando la región,
been penetrating the region.
que es que estamos concentrados
We
en
are
el precio de la
concentrated on the
electricidad
price of
y también en las
power or
interrupciones de
electricity
suministro.
and the
Y eso
interruptions
hubo
within its
apagón en
supply.
Chile,
We had a blackout in
apagón en
Chile,
España, pero que
one in
igual repercutió
Spain,
en las
but had
estaciones, ¿verdad?
repercussions, of
Y
course.
entonces tenemos entonces una
So
concentración o
we do have
sobreconcentración de la
an
agenda en esta
over
materia. Entonces
concentration
ahí
of
el tema
this
en términos de
agenda
precio, de qué es lo
here
que
in
está
terms
pasando
of
en la Comisión Nacional de Energía.
this is a report from the National Commission
Y
Commission
tiene
of
valor
Energy, by
porque
the
nos
way.
ubica en términos
These
de
have values as
calidad
well because
del
it lets us
valor
know where
eléctrico
the
hoy día.
electrical
Así de
value
claramente.
lies, if it's
Entonces mi
expensive or not.
pregunta es
My question
realmente
is, therefore,
cuánto es que gastamos en
how
energía,
much do we
no
truly
necesariamente
spend
en
on
electricidad.
energy, not just electricity?
Y esto es para mí la
For
lámina
me, this
wow de mi
is the
presentación. O sea, cuando yo y veo ustedes
surprising
porque sacan
slide
solo el
of my
teléfono y se sacan fotos esto.
presentations. Look, everybody's taking
¿Verdad?
pictures. Look.
Entonces, esta es la lámina que uno
This
dice,
is
este
the
es
slide
en
where you
realidad
say,
este es
look,
el tema. El
this is the main
22% de
issue.
los consumos
22% of the
en Chile
consumption in Chile
son eléctricos.
or electrical
El
consumption.
valor de
The
producir esa
value
energía
to produce
energética,
this
si
energy,
uno piensa que hay
if
una
you think about there's a
demanda más o menos de 89
demand of 89
terawatt hora año,
terawatt hour a year at $70, $75,
promedio, ¿no?
an average
Ese
purchasing
medio
power
mercado que
or
está
market
al
power,
valor público,
market price,
son
sorry,
más o menos
so
6.500
it gives us
millones de producir esa
$6,500
materia,
million
esa energía.
to produce this electrical grid,
Pero cuando hablo de los
approx.
combustibles
When I'm talking
fósiles,
about fossil
ahí viene la
fuels,
lista
nevertheless,
del
there's the whole
rango
list
de
of the
gasto que
range of
tenemos año a
expense
año
that we
entre
have
13.500
every
y
year between 13,000 and 22,000 million,
porque
20,
evidentemente
13 to
somos un país
22
primero
billion
que
dollars.
importamos casi todo,
First, because we're a
98% de
country that
combustibles
imports
fósiles,
98% of fossil
son un
fuels,
quinto de
this
nuestras
country,
importaciones.
one
Y
fifth
este
of
es el
our
dato para mí
imports.
más fuerte,
And
que
this
es que
is,
gastamos todos los años
we
entre 6
spend
y 8 puntos
between
del
6 to
PIB
8
en
points
importaciones
of GDP on
de combustibles
imports
fósiles.
of fossil
Y
fuels in
eso
this
es un
country.
desplazamiento de
This
gasto
is a
de otros
displacement of
sectores
expenses
que
of
no,
other
en el fondo,
sectors,
pueden destinar recursos
which
tan
could destine
importantes
their
como eso porque tenemos que
resources
importar combustibles fósiles.
because we
Eso es
have
muy
to,
importante
and they
para la
can't because we have
biomasa.
to import
Entonces ahí está el
fossil fuels. So there's a
68%
thing about
renovable,
biomass
¿no?
there.
Y
So we
eso
have
está
a
bien. Y queremos que sea más.
68% renewables. We want this to be
Esta
more,
es
of
la visión de
course,
Acera.
but
Y
this
yo
is the vision
aprendí a
of
hacer transiciones
Acera.
en PowerPoint.
I learned to do
Entonces quiero que
transitions
pongan
on
atención porque
PowerPoint.
esta
So
es la
please
parte
pay
donde
attention
yo
because it's
muestro
here
mi
where I
aprendizaje
show
sobre
my
cómo
lessons
cuesta aprender
learned.
esas cosas nuevas en
It's difficult to learn these new things using.
queremos que esto pase.
We
Que básicamente
wish
la
for this to
red
happen,
eléctrica
that the
se
electrical grid
transforme en una
itself
matriz
can
más
turn into a
importante
more
y así podamos
important
disminuir la
grid and we can
dependencia
reduce
fósil, que tiene
the
obviamente
fossil
también
fuel
consecuencias
dependency
geopolíticas y de
that have
precio,
price and
y que
geopolitical
la electricidad
consequences as well.
ojalá
And that
basada en un
electricity, we can
80-90%
lower it down to
en
89%
energía renovable y
on
almacenamiento.
renewable
Sabemos que van a
energy
haber
and
moléculas, pero
storage.
esa no es la
We know that there's
discusión.
going to be
La
molecules. That's
discusión es
not the
cómo
discussion.
hacemos
The
que
issue is
también las
how
moléculas de
can
este
we make
lado
the molecules of this side to go down as
electrificando.
well by
Esa es la visión
electrifying.
de Cera.
That's the
Por lo
vision of
tanto,
Acera.
este es el llamado.
So this is what we're urging
Primero,
everyone.
crear
First of all,
nueva
to
demanda
create
eléctrica,
new electrical demand
interconexión,
with
pero eso es
interconnections.
crucial
But
para el
this
manejo
is
de
crucial
la
for the management of
geopolítica y la conveniencia económica
the economic convenience
de
and
la razón de la
geopolitical
sustitución, además de las razones climáticas, que
reason
está
of
muy correcto,
substitution,
¿no?
plus
Pero eso es crucial.
climatic reasons, but that is
Segundo,
fundamental.
si
Secondly,
suscribimos
if we
la
subscribe
descarbonización
the
solo a la matriz
decarbonization
eléctrica,
only on the
vamos a
electrical
quedar
grid, we're going to remain
limitados.
limited,
No
therefore.
puede solamente ser
It can't be
descarbonización
just
de la matriz eléctrica.
decarbonization of the electrical
Por lo
grid.
tanto, también estamos sujetos o vamos
Therefore, we
a
are
sufrir
subject, or
el
we're going
éxito
to
si
suffer
anulan
the
las renovables.
success
Esto que hemos
of
conversado.
renewable and the
El valle emergente,
cannibalization
más penetración
of
renovable,
renewables, more
más
renewable
salidas,
penetration,
mejor
valley of
falta de
death,
demanda eléctrica,
more
y después viene la
uh,
transmisión, y
exit
después
because
viene el
they've got
almacenamiento, y después
transmission,
viene
they've
una
got
serie de cosas
storage.
más. La creación de esta nueva demanda
The creation of this new
proviene
demand will come
la
from
minería eléctrica,
the
los
electrical
data centers, los
mining,
vehículos
data
eléctricos, la
center, electrical
producción eléctrica. Ustedes
vehicles,
pongan
electrical
todo lo que se
heating.
pueda
You
electrificar,
can
¿verdad?
add anything that could be
Recién
electrified
Iberdrola
there.
dijo,
The CEO of
todos los
Vedrona
procesos
said
calóricos
all
de
caloric
menos
processes
de
of less
450
than
grados
450
Celsius son
degrees Celsius
electrificables.
are electrifiable. And it'll be very efficient to do it. Look at the case of McDonald's. They change all their ovens, the gas ovens, for electrical ovens. That's what we're talking about here.
Ahora el punto es
The whole point is it's got to be an accessible or affordable electricity, because if the value chain cannot be turned off, this is an industry that will be viable. Plus, the customer may stop paying their bills or pressure the regulators and the governments for help. And in this year and a half, we have been discussing even discussions with the executive powers, which obviously not always are good signals for consumer and producers when we start understanding that there's an industry here which is not sustainable, a policy of subsidies. And here's what we in yellow. It's necessary, therefore, to have a political electrification policy for the countries of Latin America. We have the vision to be all interconnected one day, and therefore the electrical market can grow for all. I give the floor now to my colleagues. I took more than time, a bit longer than I was supposed to. But so the question is on top of the table here. What are the other sectors, therefore, apart from the one that we've mentioned here, which should be electrified, which shouldn't either as well? So, Olade, thank you very much for the debate. And Irena brings also a lot of novelty. What are currently potential electrifiable sectors? Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, Analia.
Thank you very much, Analia. I knew that I was going to have many keynote speakers.
Nos dejó la mesa servida, como decimos, porque ahora
Very well. So now,
lo que podemos ver es
what we can see is understanding that there's an agency, as we saw, the industrial sector, in particular sectors. And here we have raw materials, renewable grid. Ludmila, could you tell us from ONADI Unido, you can tell us through your initiatives, how can you support countries with different initiatives to mobilize financing, to work with NTCs? How can you see the support offered to be able to carry out these, to make this reality or true? Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Já pronto, creo que voy a dar un buen contexto para que entres. Bueno, permítame entrar un poco con unos datos generales.
So, there's some general data here.
Me gustaría hablar en términos bastante prácticos.
I'm going to talk about, in practical terms, how Enudi is working at a global level, and maybe regionally in Latin America, with all the issues that we have on decarbonization of the industry. So, for those who do not know, UNUDI is the Organization of the United Nations for the Industrial Development.
Próxima, por favor. Está aquí, ¿no? Sí. Sí, entro con algunos datos, o sea, de emisiones principalmente.
We've got emissions mainly. We do know that in Latin America, mainly the use of the ground and also, well, that's the main source of emission, source of emission. We're talking about transport. Transport is the main level of issue here, of emissions. In Latin America, 20% of the emissions come from the industries, mainly the industry, steel, cement, concrete. So these are the ones that emit more. So the topic on the decarbonization is very relevant. I do believe that there's some sort of integration here that we are focusing very much on our discussions about the role or the contribution of the electrical transition for development. In the case of Latin America, energy transition, the mining industry, others will create a huge opportunity to re-industrialize the region. Here's some data in global terms. 70% of these emissions come from the heavier industry here. and to link net zero decarbonization plans until 2050. For this, we have to decarbonize 95% of industries. So therefore, industries have to be there, willing to discuss on this at a global level in terms of capturing and utilization and storage and hydrogen as well. The case of storage and capturing in Latin America, or capture in Latin America, is not the same discussion that around the world. However, another important topic is our cities. We are a very urbanized region, 80% already urbanized. By 2050. It is expected nearly 90% of people will live in cities. So, a large part of construction emissions will be up and coming. So that's an important contributor. Here's some emblematic programs. I can't give you too much detail on these. That's why I've tried to add here some QR codes so you can download and learn about the initiatives. But amongst these, the initiative of Clean Energy Ministerial, coordinated by ENUDI, works usually with decarbonization and talks about the role of the public sector as well on encouraging decarbonization of industries. So to stimulate the demand of industrial material, of coal use, to design industrial guidelines to lower the use of coal as well. It's important when we're talking about decarbonization, basically, of the industry. How the demand from the public sector can truly boost and encourage this. We have the Zero Partnership Alliance, which is focused on cement, steel, and concrete. This alliance is supporting many countries right now in Latin America and other regions as well in restructuring the NDCs. NDCs currently give 85% of NDCs mention industrializations, but only 45% include specific guidelines for the industries. So apart from including the industry within the NDCs, I think we need targets which will generate policies, which at the same time will generate induction plans, and we're supporting all countries on this. In the case of this alliance in the region, we're talking about Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, but there is interest on Ecuador, Peru, also from Colombia. And we're going to continue forward with this, with these NDCs in particular, but not just this, not just NDCs. The Alliance for Net Zero is within this platform, so I think it's a very interesting role, which UNIDIS is very good for this, for structuring the way that we work, to be becoming facilitators or supporting platforms which can connect all players here. So Net Zero Partnership is within the this global matchmaking platform launched last year. In Baku, which truly was a platform to connect governments, international partners, technology developers and partners, not just UNIDIS that can render services, but we truly create this rapport between the demand that comes from countries with this link towards the players, our allies that render these services. So we're working in terms of improving NDCs, net zero partnerships as well, transparency and monitoring and assessments. MRVs as well, sectorial decarbonization as well, specific sectors, financial support, and carbon filtration or leakage, seepage. Well, another initiative which is pretty interesting, our colleagues have been all week talk about this. It's Accelerate to Demonstrate, which basically accelerates the commercialization of innovative climatic solutions in countries, in developing nations. It's an interesting number, but 35% nearly of necessary reductions will be by 2025 will come from technologies in testing phase and in prototype phase yet. This is where this program comes in, financed by the United Kingdom, supporting programs, catalyzing scalable and transforming projects in critical sectors, hydrogen, green hydrogen, critical minerals, critical ore, intelligent and industrial decarbonization, amongst others. A couple of months ago, this started off. We're at the face of assessing all the propositions, but these are basically grants of $5 million approx in investing in private companies, which are in this process catalyzing this stage of trying new technologies. So during the first stage, which was closed in June 2024, it was focused on Africa more than anything. There were companies from Nepal, Tanzania, Kenya, other countries in Africa and in Nepal. So we've carried this out, and there's going to be an event in April next year in Colombia. It's going to be the global annual event of HDG in Colombia. So we hope to see you there. Also, I have to go quickly here because for the next speaker. We're very present in Latin America, I had to mention, and we have to talk about hydrogen again. What's the roles of the facilitators, therefore, for facilitating platforms for cooperation? We're working in Brazil, Mexico, and South Africa on green hydrogen at the moment. We have a global program of hydrogen, which adds many initiatives, a global program, Global Environment Facility, and others are at a national level. But another interesting initiative in Brazil is Hub Day of Hydrogen Day. Brazil and UK. The UK is a secretariat and it's the implemental sort of partner. The hub, which is the structure of all our support, connects public policies, financing, industry support to projects, bankable restructuring in specific areas. So here we have the three stages, but the most current one of this Brazilian hub is that there was a public call by the Ministry of Energy for investment plans to be financed by the CIF, the Plan Investment Funds. 5 proposals were selected with the potential of investing $250 million on green hydrogen, ammonia, green fertilizers. The next stage is to structure these investment plans with different players, led by the Ministry of the Interior, Energy, the industry, Ministry of Finance, the Inter-American Development Bank, and other banks. So we're thinking about a hub. These are 2 hubs of hydrogen and decarbonization that work together. So hydrogen is focused on decarbonization of the industry and restructuring a similar model adjusted to the needs for Mexico. This program is pretty old now, and Orudi, Industrial Eco-Packs that works on energy and decarbonization as an important axis. But the most important one of this program is beyond just energy and power, how to add other indicators, environmental indicators to the decarbonization process and social indicators also. For example, in Colombia, here in the region, it's present in Colombia and Peru. In Peru, this project facilitated a national regulation for eco-industrial parks. 7 parks receive technical assistance, and 17 are focused on eco-parks. In Peru, there are some rulings and procedures for a national industrial park program, and there's a transition to industrial eco-parks. Last week, there was a group of children in Vienna, in our headquarters, who came from Calca, the Calcan Industrial Park, because apart from working in environmental issues or waste or energy, we work also with social elements. Children learned about robotics as well. They went to show their strategy for these industrial parks. So Gaston's looking at me, 2 more and then I'm off. I'm over, especially with Orlade, because it's a very strong partner for us, so an ally. The first is this project, very interesting one. Has a huge potential in the region. Energetical districts, energy districts, which operates in Colombia currently. This project's been going on for many years now. So we're very proud that usually we have Latin America in global projects with other countries, but this project was born in Colombia. The equity of this program created a global program, and Colombia is going to be there for the supplier or provider of opportunities and experience and exchange of technical ideas with other countries of the world. Orlad is working with us on this second stage, so it's going to be a partner, a relevant knowledge partner for the second stage in Latin America. And at last, with Orlade, the global networks of regional centers or hubs in Latin America, I believe that there's a very active center, the Caribbean CCRI hub, in Central America, and Central and South in Onadi. Well, my time's up, so here's all the QR codes for whoever wishes to learn a bit more about us. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, Ludmila.
Thank you very much, Ludmila. Very well, we saw the support that we can receive from organizations and the broader vision of the industry focused on the heavy industry. Now, if we talk about heavy industries, one of the most important ones is steel in this case. So instead of bringing many companies, let's bring the whole association of steel. Yeah, so I'll give the floor to Ezequiel, who's going to tell us a little bit more factors for Latin America in the future, whether we're heading towards decarbonization. Thank you very much. I think the panel is for 7 minutes each, right? So I'm going to try to invite Ludmila and others more. Very interesting. So I'm going to make this presentation as short as possible. The important issue is the fair energy transition. This panel is very important because we're all understanding the same here. I think we have to decarbonize. There are different realities in the regions and also in industries, but I think that the industrial commitment is one of the most important ones. As Analia was saying, the demand is very important for it to be, we need the supply as well in our region as well. Our region is one of the best in the country, adding the supply. We have the best producers of the materials that the world. ACEDA groups the main producers of steel in Latin America, more than 50 members. 90% of steel produced in the region is produced by us. So this volume is currently 56 million tons per year. And we're a group of 1,400,000 families which we work indirectly or directly in this sector. Steel has a very important role. We are responsible for being in all sectors of energy renewable. Energy transition is steel, needs steel, and we have a very nice big commitment for this transformation within the next couple of years. As you can see on this chart, very quickly we tell you the importance of in each of these sectors, the different materials of steel. And as you can see, we need steel, so therefore this is for our Latin American countries to have quality products of steel and the right amount for our countries. The unloyal competition that China is doing in this sector is drastic. It's cannibalizing truly the steel of the world, in particular in Latin America. It's 40% of imports. More than half comes from China. More than half of these with dumping and with processes of certified accusations as well. This energy transition in our region will not be possible if we don't have a demand from the sectors as well. But we need to have a balanced market and a market which can they can pay for these expenses that we have. I'll explain shortly. Strategic things for us. So renewable energy is very important, of course, in the region. Latin America has more than 1/3 of its power as a supply grid on renewables. This is a very important point. Our steel within the region has 30% less carbon footprint than the rest of the world. Every time that we import 1 kilo of steel, we're importing approximately 30-40% more of carbon. That's the main issue that we're realizing, and this happens within all industries. Our industries are less environmentally impactful than productions from other countries. And sometimes we're not considering this. It's very important. Another situation that I want to mention regarding steel, or this transition, is that the world currently steel is produced through different routes. These are mainly electrical furnaces and the main furnaces. These are furnaces that transform the molecules from steel and carbon and to liquid, and then we create steel. These are production now. Electrical furnaces, production of steel. This is that the world needs for decarbonization. Electrical furnaces have 10 times even less environmental impact than the high furnaces. The Chilean producer of steel currently is the best producer of Latin America, right? Regarding environmental impacts, regarding the world, is the third producer of less environmental impact. In Chile, we produce one of the greenest steels in the world. And I have to tell you, nevertheless, that one of the largest steelworks has been closed down in Chile. We have the possibility of making the best steel in the world, but we can't defend this. We have to defend the labor, but we close the steelworks larger here in Chile, and we can't do this. We're talking about the structure that a country needs for its energy transformation and to be electrified. Without steel, we won't be able to do this. It's very important for our governments to be able to defend and to play an equal game here. And Latin America has 47%, nearly half of production is electrified. Currently, we're the region that has less impact on the carbon footprint in our industry. And I wanted to show you this. So this is a study that we've carried out in 2023 with Worst Steel Dynamic, very respectful source of information. And it says here that from the emissions, Echo 1 and 2, the industry in the world means 34% of emissions here. The industry means 1/3 of emissions of scope 1 and 2. Okay, how much the steel of the world? 7%. 7% of the world. Do you know how much Latin America is? The green part of this pie, 2%. In other words, that steel, which is key for the energy transition, which is the dependency of our countries to be able to, we need infrastructure from ports, airports, electrification, transmission lines. We're talking about 2% of 7. 2 under 7 here, less than 0.1% of emissions here of CO2. So energy transition, which is there. Well, we're talking about China, the main producer of our sector, more than two-thirds of CO2. They adjust themselves very quickly and reach at this level, this key level. Latin America also, that needs investments. The energy transition is very difficult for us. But energy transition in Latin America is on its way. In many sectors, we are the example for the world. In the particular case of the transition project that we already have, more than $8 billion even in our sectors. It's key what we're doing in Brazil, more than $6 billion within these investments already transiting of clean energy now, so our sectors can be leaders of the world in this. And the electrical furnaces, the most modern electrical furnace will be installed next year in Mexico with investments from Latin America. Only upstream of this furnace, we're talking about $3 billion. Downstream from this furnace, the investment is going to be $6 billion. This will be the first furnace for Latin America for hydrogen, the new technology for 100% decarbonized products. Very quickly, I try to be as quick as possible. Latin America has opportunity, great opportunity. We are a great region. Our Latin American countries will have to be more united than ever. We understand that we have a region that's going to be leader in this decarbonization, and we can give the example. But we have to be united and have an industry that can be competitive above all, competing on the same grounds. Unfortunately, we cannot do this right now without our sectors being invaded. By OECD, they issued a subsidy level 10 times larger than any other industry and than other country. We're competing with countries against a policy of a country which is devaluing our industry. Careful with this, because if we don't have industry here, if we're not competitive, we're not going to be able to pay for electrical transition. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, Ezequiel. Yo les prometo
Thank you, Ezequiel.
que practicamos, nos juntamos.
I can promise you that we try, we practice, we gather all the questions, and this is the third day. We have a lot of information, and while all of you saw the presentations, the amount of data that we have is huge. So we'll try to do our best to channel all of that. And now I'd like to go over to Central America. Jacqueline, what are the biggest challenges when we implement circular economy? Thank you. Well, first, I'd like to clarify something, because during the presentation they said that was from the Colombian Association of Engineers. It's the Association for Cogeneration and Energy in Guatemala, actually. And so what I'd like for everyone to understand here, when you talk about circular economy, it's cogeneration, right? And it comes from where this starts. So maybe initially, what I'd like to mention is that we need to stop thinking about the processes as economic processes, the linear processes, especially when we talk about energy. And what do I mean by that? It's like we are the end user and we turn on and off the lights, and that's the entire energy process, right? And when we talk about circular economy, we only talk about that from the consumption standpoint, where I see that what I have is an energy supply. And all my actions and all the predictions are under those terms, or just a supply, only an additional consumable. Same if I'm making bread, I get flour, and it's just one basic perspective in terms of consumables. But maybe the physical principle of energy, I'm not an engineer, I'm a lawyer, but this is something we all learned in school. Energy is not created or destroyed, it's transformed. And so when we understand that principle and we're able to apply that all through the entire energy process, and we go towards consumption and all the loads, we realize that all charges need to start looking at their processes of energy supply, whether it's thermoelectric energy. They need to stop looking at from the consumption standpoint. They need to understand that these are thermal processes, most industrial processes, and in all cases, these are energy processes. And the way of finding efficiency and participating in decarbonization, that needs to happen in a cohesive way. So in everything we do when working on those processes. And then on the other hand, we need to be able to understand that if we want to be practical, we need to understand that, there's transportation, energy, we need to adapt to change. And when you're talking about the industry side and agricultural industry, you need to apply all of it. So you need to look at your own transformation processes from that cohesive perspective. So it's impossible to talk about decarbonization, industrial decarbonization, if you're only thinking about energy. So from then, I can tell you a little bit about what's the case in Guatemala. And well, just before going to the next topic, I'd like to mention that once again, thermal processes allow this adaptability. And, in any industry that uses heat, and pretty much all industrial processes have waste, and that waste, in most instances, that can be turned into a biofuel, a useful biofuel. And in Latin America, we have countries that are highly agricultural, and they don't do that. Many countries, they use that agro-industrial waste for many other things, and we prioritize, paper, disposable cups and plates, and, some don't even do that, but they just throw it in garbage. But Guatemala is the only case where all waste is used, and it's for the use of an electric or energy. So I'll tell you a little bit about that and how we've been able to see that in Guatemala. In Guatemala, we have a saying that the needs are complicated, let's say. It's a local saying, but by the end of the 80s, we had an energy crisis, and, there was not enough installed capacity for generation. And when the country started, saying, okay, what are we going to do? We need to start implementing efficiently and faster way. And engineers had generating plants that were installed in their agro-industrial spaces, and they got their own supply. This is important to mention. They would get their own supply. They would partly use the industrial waste, agricultural waste, but that was not enough. And they would import coal, but they already imported other things. It was different things. It was diesel, and with that, they would get their own electric supply. Well, and what was there? What's still there? Just in another scale, a cogeneration process. And the cogeneration process is a process that is not necessarily related to renewables, but it is an efficiency process. So the cogeneration process, what it does, there's a 70% of thermal energy, and in a thermal conventional process, sometimes that is dissipated and not used. And in a cogeneration process, since this is thermal industrial process, I will capture it and I will rechannel it and use it again. And 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So that means it's an efficiency. And now it's very efficient in terms of electricity emissions, but just it was an economical issue as well. That was the principle. So that's desirable. That's what we want in terms of efficiency implementations. And then there's the second component, where since we could use agricultural waste, you could also use it in a thermal cogeneration process that was renewable. Therefore, it seemed like it did not make sense. We're talking about getting rid of thermal electrical plants, but if we go back to the physical principles of photovoltaic panel, it's a thermoelectric process. So we need to, change our mindset, because the idea behind an industrial process being a thermoelectrical does not mean that it cannot be renewable. And so what happened back then, per ton of sugar cane, I think she's saying, it was about 10 kilowatts of energy. And so when the new regulation came out, some adaptations in the market were made according to the new bill and new contracts with the engineers back then. And what they did was so that they could create more installed energy. And back then, the injection in the grid was fossil fuel with an efficient process. It was an efficient process, but it was fossil fuel. So those additional investments were investments that were now brought back to the end user. So that's how the market worked in Guatemala. But then what happened? What happens from 97 till now, we saw a jump in efficiency per ton of sugarcane of 10 kilowatts per hour to 70 kilowatts per hour for the same ton. And that's not even the limit. There's still more capacity. So that's an average. So some are older, but we could get to about 200. So how do we see that in Guatemala now? That means that engineers get their own supply, or self-supplied, with renewable energy in all of their operation, and they also inject back to the grid during the 6 months, the 6 dry months of the year. They provide about 30% of the electric grid. And if we look at that throughout the entire year, it's about 15%. So if we were to add self-consumption, because it's consumption that is not leaving the grid, electrical thermal grid, so that goes up to about 42 and 25. And so with that, what happened now? Well, dry years, and you see now how the stability of the sector in Guatemala, that was absolute. And in those dry years, we have a hydrological park that is quite big. There was an offset due to this base energy that we have that is renewable. And well, what I'm trying to say with all of we have a climate week in the UN, we listen to a lot of things, but sometimes we don't discuss nature-based solutions in these forums, and they demand for us to talk locally, to talk about the needs, our own needs in our own countries, and what we're doing today in these Latin American countries. And we also need to look at additional issues that seem to be outside of what we should see, but they're not, land, water, natural resources are available, social processes, biodiversity. So all of these are components that we cannot discuss or talk about, including decarbonization processes, whether they're on the production or consumption side, if they're not being considered. And for that, we need to work top-down, down-top. And, in Guatemala, we are very proud of being able to accomplish results. They speak for themselves. And, we saw a crisis in other countries in the region, but we are the only ones without any blackouts, without any power outage, and there was no variation in the cost for the end user. It was no more than 2%. And when we see that, and we see the crisis all around, and we see our growth in demand, and we want to go to the next stage where growth is still going up. So what's very clear is that we need to start working for local innovation. That's what's truly worked for us.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you.
Si yo
If
no lo conociera a Guillermo,
I did not know Guillermo, if I did not know Guillermo the way I do, I would say, oh, you have such a hard task being the last panelist after everything that's been mentioned. But I know him, I have heard him in some talks, and I said, okay, he needs to come this year because he shares so much knowledge, especially, at such hard tasks, last one before lunch. but I'm sure you'll be able to end on a high note. And being from BMW, we may think that you're going to talk about electromobility, but no, you're going, I'd like to ask about something else. I'd like to ask about decarbonization in the chain of value in the automotive industry. What can you tell about that? Well, I have a lot to talk about, and I will do that in 8 minutes. Well, hi everyone. I'm Guillermo Arias. I'm the President for Governmental Affairs in BMW for Latin America. I am originally from Nicaragua, very proud to be a Nicaraguan, and I'd like to tell you what we're doing in BMW so that we can reduce our carbon footprint. And there's two components to this story. About 15 years ago, we started with the design and production of electric cars, and 15 years later, we have almost 25 models are completely electric without taking into account all hybrid models, and we have different types of vehicles that are being sold at a worldwide level. And so it's really a successful case in Latin America, Colombia. Almost 28% of our sales are electric, Uruguay almost 30%, Costa Rica 29%, and so on. So very high percentages in the entire region. And so now what's coming? We have a second phase where to become a responsible company and to reach our goals, to reach the goals from the Paris Agreement, it was not only hard to produce electric cars, but we need to go beyond that. So what we've done in the last 7, 8 years is we started decarbonizing all of our value chain. And being in Chile, I'll share 2 examples. I came here, remember, in 2018 with BMW team, and we signed an agreement with Codelco so that they could help us or enable green copper with our own specifications, things that we needed so that we could use them and to count carbon footprint and reducing our carbon footprint. And then we started buying lithium in Chile, and in the pandemic in 2021. There's a carbon footprint that is lower than the one produced in Australia and other countries because it's not rock lithium, but it's extracted from the salt pits. So these are 2 essential examples. So what else are we doing? And I love your presentation on steel, because we only buy steel with low carbon footprint that is done in electric furnaces. So not a lot of people know that, and you are absolutely right. It's great news about Mexico. We need to talk later. And then aluminum. All aluminum, but not all of it, but a big part of it that we buy, it's produced in Dubai in a plant that is 100% powered with solar panels and lithium batteries. They're done with 100% renewable energies. And finally, we try as much as possible. We try for suppliers and those that supply our suppliers in our plants for them to be nearby so that we can reduce the carbon footprint and have less cost in transportation. So it's all well thought, but there's a lot to do. There's still a lot to do, but as manufacturers, we want to integrate suppliers and those that supply our suppliers and those that supply raw materials, such as the case of copper. And traceability, that's key. And that's what we're doing as an industry. There's a company called Catena X, and what they do is they digitalize and they use AI so that we can integrate the entire value chain from lithium producer, copper producer, and the spare parts, batteries, and so that we can have an entire accountability system to measure our carbon footprint, because you're saying it this way, I'm saying it this other way, but then you're comparing pears to apples and not pears to pears or apples to apples. So the idea is for us to have a financial accountability, a GAP. How do you say that in Spanish? The accountability principles are generally accepted, so we need to have the same thing not only in the automotive industry, but in other industries as well. And so that's what we're working on, so that we can present our investors and consumers and tell them, no, they're not doing any greenwashing, but okay, this is what we actually do, this is what we are issuing, and these are our emissions in terms of carbon, and this is our carbon footprint when producing a vehicle. So that's what we're going to do. We have plants here in the Americas and one in the US, producing about 500,000 cars a year, and we use recycled steel. The steel boards, 50% is recycled steel, and also electric furnaces, as mentioned. And our San Luis Potosí plant produces about 200,000 cars, and they will have same measurements, the same emissions in other plants at world level. So for the rest of the day, I'm available if you want to know about our green production. And I really hope that for Latin America, this is useful, and you can start spreading the word in all of your industries, wherever you work, and to start considering this, because it's really important, because it's not only, it's the entire value chain. Thank you. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias a toda la audiencia.
Thank you. Thanks to the entire audience. This is what happens when, in the 10th week of energy, you go out in the field and you have, 6 people that are the best. And really keeping into account that this was something that we really wanted to talk about, and it took a bit longer than we expected, but we'll continue to talk about decarbonization during the afternoon, maritime decarbonization, land decarbonization. We'll be talking about mining. There's a mining panel, because without mining there's no transition. So I'd really like to thank Ezequiel, Ludmila, Joanna, Jacqueline, Anlia, and Guillermo, and all of you for sticking around. Thank you.
¿Aló? Ahí sí. Ya, sí. Muchas gracias a todas y a todos.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Gaston, for that panel. We'll take an official picture of our panelists.
Para cerrar.
And I'd really like to thank you for your attendance. We are 15 minutes behind. It was not so bad, but I think it was really worth it to have this discussion. And then I'm sure we'll continue discussing a bit more during the afternoon, during lunch.
Bien, con la foto entonces damos por cerrado esta sesión.
Okay, so this is it for this session. We'll be back at 2 p.m. So we'll continue with the next panels. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon and great lunch.